Hey everybody, I've been getting a lot of inquiries and a lot of emails asking me to do a little refresher course for those of you that have been making these bracelets regarding the loop and the button closure. I want to reiterate that there's lots of different ways to do this, but keep in mind, again, this is the hardest working part of your bracelet. This is what keeps it on your wrist. So I'm going to go through this step by step, and you're going to have to kind of excuse me. I've chosen red for this kind of Celtic braid here that we're going to be working with today, and I will be using black thread. Unbeknownst to me, as the artist creating things, seeing black thread on a black piece of leather is kind of tough. So by the end of this little project here, it's going to look a little like Nightmare Before Christmas, but this will give you a clear view of what you need to be doing in order to make sure that your loop is stable and that it will stay on your bracelet as well as your button on the other end. So I've got my bracelet here with my already attached braid. This is still open in the back. I have my piece of 2¼ inch leather reindeer cord here, which will act as our loop. I also have, and you should already have this prepared, my small piece of leather going through my reindeer antler button. You need to have both of these things ready to go when you get ready to sew the loop on the one end. What I'm going to do is take my needle and thread, which has already been threaded onto my sinew. It is knotted at one end. And if you do this right, you won't need to add any other thread. And this is going to take a little spitballing and a little eyeballing, but here we go. You're going to take your reindeer leather cord and you are going to divide this in half with the legs being parallel, just like this. Now, this is important that you pay very close attention to what you're doing because this is where you can actually stab your finger with your leather needle. You're going to take the end of your leather needle and you are going to tease this through one end of the cord and do this one at a time so that you have a little shrimp on the Barbie here. Now I'm just going to kind of double check this against the diameter of my button. The thing is that this opening only needs to be large enough to accommodate the button going through with just a little bit of resistance, and I think I'm okay here. And I'm going to put my button off to the side and I'm not going to lose track of this. And I'm going to pull my thread through, and again I'm using black so that you can see very clearly. There's a knot in the end of my thread here, one end. I'm going to pull this very tight. All right. Now I'm going to keep these two ends parallel to each other and I'm going to proceed to make a wrap around the entire cord. So I'm going to go once, twice, and on the third rotation I'm going to make a slip knot around the whole thing, kind of like a hangman's noose, around the whole thing, and I'm going to pull this tight. And if I've done this correctly and I let go, these two sections should stay together just perfectly. All right? Now you can see I've got my wrap around the whole thing. All right, next step. I'm going to flip over my finished bracelet here. And this is my loop end. So loop to loop. And this is the sueded side. This is the polished side. We're going to be entering from the sueded side. I'm going to take my needle and I am going to go in the middle about 1/4 inch from the edge here. And I'm going to push the needle through. Pull it all the way through until your loop bit is nice and snug against the edge. Now, just aesthetically wise, I don't want to see this wrap extending out past the edge here. I want this to be well below the edge. Now, here's the trick. I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to pass this through the loop, pull it through. Once I've done that, separate these two sections, just like that. And then you will take your needle and you will make a pass underneath the wrap, like this. And then you will pull this tight. Don't pierce your wrap because the cutting end of your needle does just that. It will cut these threads apart. And the whole idea is to actually have your loop sewn to the leather so that when you put it on, the loop just doesn't pull out. Now I did that one time and you're going to do it again. Through the loop, just like that. Spread these two sections apart. And again, you can make a pass right underneath, in between the two sections. Come up on this opposite side here. And pull it tight. So in essence, we have a wrap that's going this way. And then we have something capturing this wrap going the opposite way. So it's almost like making the sign of the cross. But when I pull on this isn't going to come out. Now I'm going to proceed to close up my back and I'm going to stitch all the way down. And once I've done that, I will go ahead and show you how to do the button. All right. So here we've got our loop. It's already been sewn on and I have proceeded to actually sew up the back all the way down to the end here. Remember not to sew it all the way shut because we still need a little bit of room to actually add our button. So I'm going to flip my bracelet around like this. And remember from the other tutorials how we got these cuts here. At the very end to thread our braid through, we're again going to take the leather and we're going to fold this in half like this. And you're going to make a very small cut, about 1/8 of an inch or so from the edge. Very, very tiny, just like that. And then I happen to use these handy dandy hemostats. I had a gentleman take my course who was a fly fisherman, and for years I would try to actually put my button in here by stabbing it with a needle or trying to paper clip. And he had the bright idea to actually use these small hemostats used for tying flies. So here's one way to actually get your button threaded through. We'll clip it here, pull it through here, and voila! No stabbing fingers, nothing wrong there. But what we're going to do is we're going to apply a little bit of glue here, press our tab down, a little bit more glue, and bring our seams together and sew this shut. So I'm just going to flip this open. I prefer rubber cement, but you can use any kind of craft glue that you like as long as you don't use too much of it. Here, so I'm just going to put a little dab in here. Not a big deal. Press this tab down so that it lays down in between your seam here, and then you're going to bring your seam together and you're going to press this flat. All right. So now I'm going to do this a little bit in Mr. Rogers time so I can show you how we sew this shut. So again, I've got my black thread here and I'm just going to continue to lift up my edge, and I'm starting to pull my seam together, and I actually have to turn the bracelet myself. And this red leather is a teeny bit thicker, so it takes a little bit to push the needle through. Now as I'm closing in on the home stretch here, what I'm going to do is on one of my passes with my needle, I'm going to really kind of dig down and see if I can't grab some of the tab that's attached to the button here on one of my passes. So that we'll actually have a stitch that's anchoring down in the middle of the bracelet. All right. And again, if I'm stitching this correctly, it will pull the seams together. Nice. Little black and red here, very nice. You should be able to see this very clearly. And you only really need to do one stitch there where you grab it within the path of your needle. All right, now here I am at the end. I'm going to pick up and just do my little corner here. And the next thing I'm going to do is, in case you weren't able to get a stitch in the body of the bracelet or body of the button here, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take my needle and I'm actually going to go completely underneath my button, just like this. I'm going to pull this nice and tight. And you see how the button sort of lists this way? We actually want that to be horizontal. So the way that we achieve that is actually to take the thread and we're going to wrap this once, twice, 3 times, and then we're going to take our needle and pass down again right underneath and hopefully come up in the center seam on the opposite side. And remember, that wrap has to stay around the needle. Just like that. All right, so what I've got now is this really nice little lift here that my cord will fit under without actually having to pull the button out. Okay, so here I am in the back, and what I'll do next is I want to make a knot, and I'll take the eye end of the needle and back it up into like the nearest stitch. If you do this with the cutting end, you could cut your thread. I'm going to make a loop, pull that nice and tight, and instead of cutting this right at the point where the knot is, I'm going to run my thread down the center here. Again, this stuff is it's a little thick. And sometimes at this point, my hands might be tired. I'm going to grab the hemostats and I pull this through. Just like that. Boom. Give this a little straighten up here. And now I can cut. And we have our nice button. Again, thank you so much for all your emails and all of your suggestions. Look for more videos. If you haven't subscribed, please do and get that sweet 20% off. If you've been reading our blog lately, we got a nice little shout out in the New York Times regarding Saami inspired bracelets, your Northern European sort of flair article. And also too, we will be putting together kits with wider braids, multiple braids, etc., etc. So we're working on 3 styles right now for that. So please contact us if you have any other questions and check back often. Thanks so much.